Imagine preparing your child for a race, training them for years on how to run as fast as they can, only to find out on race day that everyone else is riding a high-speed electric train. Well, that is exactly what is happening in the traditional education system today. The world of work is undergoing a massive shift driven by AI, yet standard classrooms are still using the 19th century model to prepare kids for a 21st century reality. They are training our children for jobs that simply will not exist by the time they graduate. As home educators, though, we have the freedom to pivot, adapt, and give our kids the exact creativity, critical thinking, and real-world skills they need to thrive in this new era. In today's episode, I'm sharing snippets from an incredible presentation given to my Launch Your Homeschool students back in 2025. Our speaker is the brilliant Hind Adeagbo. Hind is the co-founder and the head of the online school Stewards.ONE. She's also a home educating mother of 7. So let's dive into these snippets and look at how AI is reshaping your child's future and how we can raise kids who are truly ready for it.
So really, the future is volatile or uncertain. And I think that could be true regardless of the time we're in. But I think that is even more so for now, that things are changing quite rapidly. And they're changing quite rapidly for the most part due to AI and the automation revolution. Now, I want to say that this isn't like the first time in history that different technology has been introduced. Just to show my age, when I was a little girl, we didn't have computers. And I remember when like computers were like literally these big, huge machines. And we had, and that was like when I was in middle school or like early secondary school. And, I typed everything with a typewriter, and for us to turn in formal work, it was with a typewriter. And, the calculator, even something we take for granted right now, like a lot of teachers actually had protests about the calculator. They were worried about that it would change education, and rightly so. So there have been technical advances that have been integrated into education have not been at the caliber or the scale of AI. And not only that, this AI is actually rapidly changing itself. So, ironically, it's actually not new. It's been around for quite a long time, but I think it's just been introduced to the public market and maybe the last like 3, 4 to 5 years. But the acceleration of it and the tools and the use cases and how it's being used has had a rapid acceleration in the last 1 year, 1 to 2 years. And so with these huge technological advances and the onslaught of it, it's really changing what, our children are going to face in, coming up. And so our education system really needs to shift to accommodate this change. Otherwise, basically, our children are preparing for a future that doesn't exist. And largely, I know I'm in touch with a lot of university students, and I hear this all the time where the university students who are graduating, we're looking at things like medicine, we're looking at things like nursing, we're looking at things like engineering, we're looking at every single sector being affected by these tools and by what's happening right now. So all of those assumptions that I talked on the last slide, that the children are tracking to a career, those things actually are more and more becoming challenges. But there are a lot of people who are out of work, and there are a lot of jobs that are no longer available, that are not coming back. And so there's a lot. So currently we have a lot of people from probably the ages of like 25 to probably even 60 or so who are being laid off, who actually don't know really what to do now at this point, whether they should retrain, what to retrain as. And so all of these discussions have taken place, that people have fears about what's going to happen and how, and the conversation, however the technology progresses, unfortunately, whether we'd like or not, it puts us in a situation where we can see that we can start to prepare our children for what will be happening, what will be going on. So the number one thing, I think, or one of the most important things our children will need, is adaptability. They'll need to be able to be flexible. They'll need to be able to pivot. they'll need to be able to have skills and have a more of an emphasis on skills, because they won't be employed as we know it today. They won't be employed in a sector. There's going to be an interim of time where people who know how to use AI in all fields will be employed over people who don't know how to use AI. And then there's going to be a period of time where it's going to be down to innovation. Entrepreneurship is going to be really important. The people who understand that, looking for problems to solve, because that's basically what entrepreneurship is. It's problem solving at a very, very large scale. With our students, with our children, we really want to focus on developing all of these traits. And as we looked at the first slide or earlier, that we can't assume that the education process that we are used to using or knowing about will automatically develop critical thinking, will automatically develop emotional intelligence, will automatically develop reasoning skills or any number of skills that they'll need. So the good news is, as home educators, we are poised to have a unique opportunity to respond. You're on, any Instagram or LinkedIn, you will see the discussions about education right now, because really it's almost like we're in a crisis in the education world, because I think people are starting to recognize that, wait, this system is obsolete, but then we're kind of stuck in it because our children still need to take GCSEs. Depending on the age of your child, like my son's 22, he can still kind of go in, he still has a little bit of opportunity to go into what we would normally class like as a job that we're familiar with, whereas my 10-year-old child might not have the same opportunities available. And as a home educator, we're already out of the system, and we already have the ability to focus specifically on our child and make very specific, clear decisions. Somebody was asking about what subjects to choose, or which, I'm going to be talking inshallah about what boards to choose. All of those things that we actually hold the power to orchestrate and to figure that out for our children. And we also have the ability to integrate capability development into our education very specifically. So how do I make sure that my child is resilient and patient and has gratitude? And how do I make sure that my child has analytical reasoning or problem solving or any number of skills? I can actually teach to that. I can actually provide an environment for them to develop. And I can also prioritize real world readiness, which I'm going to talk about later, which I think is a really important key factor. Real world readiness. So that's children learning skills that will apply to the real world, because that is more important than ever. Academic study. So it's a way for them to learn, how to read, how to write, and capability development, which is, them actually being able to be a certain way in person and character, them being able to actually do something, because as we talked about before, just because somebody has scored something on it and an exam doesn't mean they have anything behind that substantively. So that's the inner circle of what we focus on. But then surrounded by those three components, we also look at family and social circle. Because if you're embedded in a family system, so some of my friends, and I say this, because my eldest is 22, I think we could have never imagined how society would have changed in that time. So like I'm saying to you, how the things that I was willing to expose my 22-year-old to at the time are very different than my 5-year-old now. Very, very different times. So family becomes really, really key, and community becomes really key, because this cannot be done by ourselves. And I can understand, like I'm from California originally. Most of my family isn't in the UK. And so I've had to, rely on community and social circles to support, even if it's online, something for the children, place of belonging, because that's where the children will find role models. That's where the parents will find support. And that's where you can, especially as teenagers, I think they've done studies that teenagers just need, they tend to need more than their parents to look up to. And they tend to listen to other adults of influence around them more than their parents. So like an auntie and uncle. When there's my kids and some of the kids from their old madrasa went on a camping trip. And I asked one of the boys, like, who's your favorite teacher? And he mentioned one of the sheikhs, and he's like, yeah, he's just that guy. He's just that guy. And it was really funny. And I was like, mashallah, that this little boy who's like 11 years old, his role model is the sheikh, and that's something that can, be really positive by having your children be a part of a dynamic community. Another thing that, probably would be important, which is here on the outer ring, is business, enterprise, and organizations. So what I mean by that is, for example, like at Stewards, we actually have students come, or home education students, or even students who are in schools, they come to us for work study. And it's important to network with different organizations, different businesses. It could even be just like your local corner shop, if that's somebody you trust, but different businesses, so that your children are exposed to different sides of businesses, different types of businesses. My 22-year-old, he took a gap year between secondary, his A-levels, and uni. And he was working as an intern, as were a whole group of young men. They were working in a company, interning, doing different jobs in tech and IT. And it gave them invaluable life experience. They could put it on their CV, and they just have an advantage over other people who just go straight through school. And so businesses do offer those types of opportunities. And so just being able to network and connect to, businesses, whether they be online or local. If you are an entrepreneur and you own your own business, having your children work in your business. So one of my girls who's she used to be my executive assistant when I used to run my business, Healing with Hind, years back. She was 13 at the time. She even traveled with me. If I would travel and have a retreat or something like that. And, my son also would do different tasks. So involve your children in your business and give them the exposure behind the scenes of what it takes to run a business, and give them roles and responsibilities. Also partnering with strategic education providers. That, homeschooling can be really isolating and difficult to do, or challenging to do by yourself in the secondary years. Part of the reason why because my husband and our co-founders wanted to create Stewards was because we had, a 14-year, she was 12 at the time. And it was like, okay, what are we going to do about her secondary education? And how are we going to do all of this by ourselves? And we wanted to build something out to be able to support her and actually support other families at the same time. And then the last thing, really looking at home education, particularly in the UK context, is your examination boards. Those are really important. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but those exam boards can actually be your friend. And I know some people might feel like, okay, well, what is an exam? What can an exam contribute to my child's development? But an exam, the whole exam process, and going through exam technique and choosing different boards can actually give your children advantage or not, depending on what they want to study, depending on, the context of the skills you're trying to develop for them.
What a powerful perspective from Sister Hind. If there's one big takeaway from today's session, it's this. While traditional schools struggle to keep up with the speed of AI, we as home educators have the power to raise agile, critical thinkers who know how to use these tools and not be replaced by them. A huge thank you to Sister Hind for sharing her wisdom with our community. And if you're looking for structured support for your older children, secondary school age, then definitely check out her online school at Stewards.ONE. They're doing fantastic work to help students navigate both academics and real-world skills. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Are you feeling excited or nervous about AI and your child's future? Come over to Instagram and let me know your thoughts. I'm Our Muslim Homeschool over there, or drop a comment underneath this YouTube video or podcast episode. But until next time, Assalamu alaikum.